Ian Littlejohn, and some of you who were assembled here heard him speaking to us. I'll tell you the impetus for this presentation today was some of you attended the Controllers Conference in March. Can I see hands? The lead-off speaker at that was Philip Campbell, who is kind of an evangelist for the role of the CFO and the controller in business management. And he gets really excited when he finds a tool that he can use to present financial information and analytics to the owners of privately held companies. That really energizes him. And he came across a tool, Power BI, very enthusiastic about that tool. And he gave us an overview of how you can utilize that in communication and delivering visual analytics at the conference on the 28th. A lot of us in the audience were really interested in how we could operationalize the ideas that he'd given us. How can we take this utilization of Power BI and make it real? So we went back to him and asked him to present today on that. How can we actually get this set up and running? And he would have loved to have been here today, but he said that he could not. And his coach in his own utilization of this process was Ian Littlejohn. So we asked Ian to do a presentation for you today. Ian is with Data Insight Training, and for more than 15 years, he has been focusing on working with companies to perform business and data analysis. So he's no new kid on the block when it comes to data analysis. He is an experienced trainer, and he does a lot of training and development of training for the web. When we had a little dry run with him the other day, he told us a bit about a series of courses that he's put together to help people achieve the Microsoft Certified Systems Analyst certification. And he might talk to us about that at the end of his presentation. But now it's my pleasure to introduce you to, from the rolling hills of West Yorkshire, Ian Littlejohn.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Oh, thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Kim and Philip. Is the voice coming through okay? Is everything sounding okay on that side?
Loud and clear.
Excellent, excellent. So there's probably a slide on the screen at the moment, just giving a sort of brief introduction, and thanks to Kathy for the introduction as well. And as she spoke about, my background really in the training and consulting side, although I must admit my real passion is around training. Love training with people, love working with people, and seeing as the skills develop and new insights and new information becomes available from data, the kick that people get from what it can do for your business and the new decision making that can come around from that. The focus, a lot of it has been around the Microsoft products. So anybody who's worked with the Excel pivot tables, and you may have worked with Power Pivot and Power Query, which are a couple of new tools in the last sort of 6-7 years that Microsoft have produced, that I think really has made it very easy for business users now to actually start doing a lot of data analysis that required technical capabilities in the past. So Microsoft have done a really, really great job of starting to give us tools that us as business users can use, especially Excel users, without having to be very technical and understanding things like SQL and things like that. And then, as Kathy mentioned, really the new product that's really been of interest is the Power BI product. Out of interest, Power BI really developed actually out of Power Pivot, Power Query, and another product called Power View that was in Excel for a while, and has really changed the fact of what we can do with Excel data. So just from an introduction start on my side, as we say, we focus on the classroom training, online training. I do have my courses on udemy.com, so if you just search my name, Ian Littlejohn, you'll see a list of the courses. However, we are in the process at the moment of updating those courses to be in line with the MCSA BI reporting certification that Microsoft are busy in the process of just releasing at the present time, which I think is really exciting for any business users out there. If you are strong with Excel, you can actually now get a BI reporting certification from Microsoft, and again, without necessarily having strong technical skills like you would in the past. So I think just in terms of what we're going to be going through today is we're going to kick off with some Excel data, just like all good situations as business users. We're going to have a nice spreadsheet of data, and we're really going to kick off by saying what types of questions could we ask of this data, and how do we then convert those questions into something that we can visualize. From that, we're going to put together a Power BI dashboard. And I think one of the impetuses for this session was really to sort of look in an hour's time frame. What is possible to put together? Can I actually take a set of data and within an hour really have a dashboard up and running that can actually give me new insight and information to my business? So we're not going to be able to get stuck into a huge amount of detail with that, but what we can do is just show you the life cycle that we would go through in terms of being able to take that data and turn it into the dashboard and be able to publish that up onto the internet. Apologies for the spelling mistake there. I do apologize for internew rather than internet there. Didn't pick that up earlier. We're also going to talk about the mobile options. One of the big things that's happened with the world out there today is really everybody's connected. We have our tablets, we have our smartphones, and we're going to look at the fact of once we have this dashboard and when we have this information, how do we actually share that information and have access to it in a real-time situation? And what are some of the things that are happening? A couple of interesting new technologies that Microsoft have developed. One's called Q&A, which is natural language questions and answers. So we're going to have a look at that and see how it works within the Microsoft environment. And that's really working towards the fact of moving to what we call conversational business intelligence. So it's really about being able to ask questions of your data, and then when you get answers from your data, being able to then ask questions within the context of the fact of the data that you're receiving. So moving from the fact of doing reporting, but much more the fact of being able to ask questions and be able to get new insight from your data, which really leads on to the next side, is how can the computer actually help us with insights? So the human brain is great at a lot of things, but it's not always great when there's a number of different variables at play within our data. And often computers can look at a number of different variables, bring up new insights within our data that we may not have picked up, new patterns, relationships within that data. So we're going to have a look at a couple of examples of that. And we're going to also look at something called the custom visuals, which will see how we can bring custom visuals into our Power BI environment, and really gives us a lot of new insight in terms of the fact of what that data can mean. So we're going to kick off now. We're going to actually just start with an Excel data set. And I'm going to bring that up on your screen now. So hopefully that's all showing. And you'll see within this Excel data sheet over here, pretty standard type of information, KPI information that you may be collecting for your business. So you can see we've got a week ending, we've got a date over there, we've got a value of that we've collected of cash, we've got an invoiced amount for the week, we've got our accounts receivable balance, bank target, a target for our collected amounts, some average daily sales, a DSO amount, and invoice target, and a trailing 4-week figures as well. So we're not going to look at all of this data. We're actually just going to pick a couple of these columns to look at, but you can see it's quite rich in terms of the different type of data that we've got available. Now, traditionally, obviously, within Excel, we could do some calculations, some formulas, we could do and get some information out of here. But hopefully we can show within Power BI how much more we were able to generate from this information. So if I was to take this information now and say, well, what are the key things that I really would want to be able to do with this? There would be some questions that would start to frame from this. So a brief analysis of this may say, how does our collected compare to our collected target? So over here, we've got a collected amount, but we've also got a collection target over here. So how have we actually now compared between the two? And how are we doing over time? So we may over here had a really good collection, but quite clearly the week before was not very good. So over time now, how are we doing against that target? So that would maybe one question that we're looking at. The same when it comes to our invoiced amounts. We may be interested to know what is our total invoiced amounts versus what was our actual invoice targets that we're looking to do. So that's a normal sort of analysis that we would want to do. We would want to compare the two amounts, so our actual and our target, and we'd want to understand the variance. So I'm going to talk about just a few different types of analysis that we could actually do on this data just now. Another question could be, is our bank balance healthy? So over time, our bank balance will be continually changing, and we would want to know overall what's the general trend. Is our bank balance improving? Is it going down? Is it volatile? Or is it stable? So there might be different things that we might want to know within our bank balance as to how it's doing against the target as well. Okay, so if we start to look at these questions that we're asking of our data over here, there's a number of different forms of analysis that we can actually perform on this data to start to get us some answers from this. So the first form of analysis that we talk about is comparison analysis. So comparison analysis is often about understanding which one's biggest, which one's smallest, and how much bigger is one than the other. So if we've got our invoiced amounts over here, we would tend to be looking and seeing how has it changed. Particularly in this case, we'd be looking at time, but you'd be looking to see what are the biggest invoiced amounts, what were the smallest amounts. And obviously we'd like to understand when we've got a small invoiced amount, what were the factors that actually made that happen. The next type of analysis that we look at, really, really important, and in this case it's going to be really important because we actually have a date within our data, is trend analysis. So how does things change over time? And what is the shape of the data over time? So when we're looking at trend analysis, we're often wanting to know, is things improving, or is things going down, or are things staying stable, or are they volatile, as I mentioned before? So what are the key trends within that data? Another key type of analysis that we do is ranking analysis. So what are the key rankings within our figures? So often this is your top 10 analysis. What were my top 10 weeks, for example? Or what were my key months that maybe I had the best invoicing? From the opposite side of the spectrum, we might be looking also at what happened to the bottom side of things. So what was my bottom 5, or what was my bottom 10? So often if you're looking at your customers or you're looking at your products, you would want to know, what are my top 10 products? What are my top 10 customers? What is my bottom 10? We may also want to look at percentages. So which products make up my top 20% of sales, or what products make up the bottom 20%. So key ranking analysis or ranking analysis is really about understanding what is the ranking within those products and which items would work from there. And often what comes from ranking analysis is something called Pareto analysis. So those of you who maybe heard of the 80-20 rule or so, often what we find within business is that you'd find that 80% of your profit or so could be generated for, say, 20% of your customers, or from 20% of your products. So often when we start looking at rankings, we may want to move into the fact of looking at Pareto analysis and then starting to understand what are the key 20% of our customers who may be generating, say, 80% of our profit, or what are the key 20% of our products. Because if we understand what are the key 20% that are generating, say, the 80% of profit, we can focus on that 20% and we'll get a much better result than if we're focusing on 80% of the products that are only generating 20% of the profits, for instance. So it doesn't always work out to say that you're going to get an 80-20 split between the two, but you tend to find that you will have often a certain amount of customers that are generating a proportionally higher part of the profit than you would say from your products, for example. So Pareto analysis, another form of analysis that's really important. Then, as we've already mentioned, variance analysis. So over here, I've got an invoiced amount, an actual, and I've got a collected amount, which is my target. So variance analysis, I often understand what is the difference between my actual and my target, and how much have I varied from that. So from the variance analysis, we can start to understand what is the difference between those budgets and what do we need to do to make that up. Another favorite form of analysis, anybody who's put together pie charts would know, is contribution analysis. So how much does something contribute to the whole? So from that, we're often looking at percentages, and we would want to know what the percentage breakdown is for items. Just out of interest, if you are working with pie graphs, and so please make sure that you're always showing percentages on your pie graphs. They should always be used to show percentages, and not too many items on your pie graphs. I've often seen these pie graphs that look like a bicycle spoke wheel and got way too many actual items, and you can't actually see what's actually going on them. So another form of analysis we could look at is also frequency analysis. This is really around your groupings and buckets. And we could take that and we could start to understand within key groupings how many occurrences happen. So the reason for sort of bringing this up at this moment while I'm stirring up this Excel data sheet is that really a key part of data analysis is actually framing your questions before you even touch the data. Once we've got a good set of data like we've got here, we really want to be able to say, what questions do we want to ask of this data? Now, quite clearly within this data, I've got some good variance analysis because I've got my collected amount and I've got a target. So in this case, I would want to know what is the variances. And also because I've got a week ending date in here, trend analysis should be a key element that I would be interested in, is to see what are my general trends. So straight away within this data set here, there's a couple of forms of analysis that I would pick up straight away and say those are a couple of key ones that I would want to bring across into my dashboards. The other key element around the fact of data analysis is visual analysis. So if we've got a set of information like this, when should I use tables to show information, i.e. a text sort of response? or when should I use graphs? And if I'm using graphs, what types of graphs should I use to show what type of data? And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I think from a skills point of view, visual analysis is something that we're learning a lot about, is how the brain actually interprets data and interprets the images that are given. And the better often that your visualizations can be, the better insight we can often get from the fact of understanding patterns and relationships within the data, which gives us those key insights to inform our decision making. So visual analysis is a really important field. Okay, so that's basically our Excel spreadsheet that we got. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just kick up Power BI, and we're going to bring that in, and we'll look at how we can convert this data, hopefully into some quick and useful dashboard info. Okay, so I've just got the splash screen there of the Power BI. I'm just going to close that. And our first step is really that we just get data. One of the real powerful things of Power BI is that it can get data from a lot of different sources. So you have your traditional sort of file sources, your database sources, even online sources. You can get it from things like Google Analytics, for instance, even Facebook. It looks like we can get data from Facebook these days, but basically so can Power BI. But you do actually have to have the right credentials to be able to do it. So you can see that we get a lot of different data options that we can actually work in. A really nice one is actually one to get data from the web. Often we bring in data from web pages such as Wikipedia or financial stocks and things like that that have been updated, and we can bring it into these dashboards and use them. But in this case, I'm actually just going to use an Excel file, and we're going to connect to that file that I just showed you in Excel. I'm going to open that, and we're going to bring that in. And the first step that happens over here is it will show me within Excel that any tables and sheets of data that I have within that. So I've only got one sheet of data in here, which is the information view, and I'm going to click on load. I'm going to bring this straight into Power BI because I don't need to make any changes to it. But if there was a little bit of data problems, I do have a really powerful tool in here called the Query Editor. If anybody's used Power Query within Excel, basically it works exactly the same. And we can clean up our data and do quite a lot of data transformations within that. Really, really nice tool to use. But in this case, I don't need to do any of those. So I'm just going to load the data, and it's going to bring that straight into my Power BI interface over here. So from the Power BI interface, very simple to work with. You'll see at the top you get your traditional sort of menu system and a ribbon system, just like we would in Excel. It's really easy for us Excel users to be able to move across in here and understand the interface. Here we get a report which we use a canvas to be able to create this. You can create many pages within a canvas, so you can just keep adding as many pages as you want within this. I'm only going to use one page here, but you can use others. We can also within Excel, and you would be able to see that. But you don't get the ability to actually change your data. Your data is read-only data. So if you do need to make any changes to this, you would change it in the original Excel file and then just re-import it. One of the powerful things that Power BI can do is we can create relationships between tables of data. If anybody's ever done VLOOKUPs and things like that, relationships are much easier to work with. But I'm not going to show that on this one. Okay, so we're going to kick off over here. We've got our set of data that's been brought in. We've got our table over here, and you can see that we've got all these fields over here that were in my Excel database. So let's say, for example, I was interested to know what is the total amount that has been actually collected from that Excel spreadsheet we were working with. Now, when I drag it onto my interface over here, onto the canvas, you'll see that a visualization now becomes active. Now, the default one here actually becomes a column chart because this is actually a numeric value. So it defaults to the visualization, but it doesn't mean that we have to use it. We do have all these other types of visualization. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually set this to a card visualization. Now, card is very useful when you want to just see what is the total of something or what is the average of something. So in this case, it's just totaling up my total amount of collected. So I've got my card over here, and that's what it does. If I wanted to see something different, if I wanted to see the average, very easy to be able to change my method of aggregation. I wanted to see the minimum amount that was collected. I want to see the maximum amount that was collected. Very easy to change these methods of aggregation over here. But we're going to keep it as a sum over here, which is now currently summing everything that was in that Excel sheet. Just to be able to see this a little bit easier, we do get some formatting options. I'm not going to have the time to get stuck into these. Besides, I'm going to just put a border on this just so that you can see it a little bit easier when it's on there. Okay, we're going to also then just create another one of these scorecards. And in this one over here, I'm going to want to know what is the total collected target. And you can see I'm just dropping these fields in here. and it's now summing that up. And you can see there's a difference between how much has been collected and actually what the target was between the two. And I might be interested to know, well, over time, how has that happened? How has the collected and the collected target differed? So what I could look at is, say, for example, to look at a different type of visualization. So let's say I wanted to take a line chart over here. So I'll just make that a little bit bigger. And over here on my axis now, I'm going to use my week ending because I know that gives me my dates. Now, Microsoft figures out that because this is a date field, we actually have a hierarchy in here of a year, a quarter, a month, and a day, and automatically creates that within your axis. You can override it and tell it you only just want to work with the week ending as a field itself. But in this case, I'm actually going to work with it as a hierarchy, and that's created automatically. I could then take the values and say I want to see my total collected, I want to see my total target, and we now have two lines. And currently, hopefully it's showing on the screen okay, but if you can see the title, it says collected and collected target by year at the moment. What you'll see at the top over here is we have some drill down capability. And I'm actually going to make this a little bit bigger just so you can see on the screen. But if I use these drill down capability, what I can do is I can tell it to actually now say show by year and quarter. If I drill down again, I can tell it to show by year, quarter, and month. So in this case, I'm going to stick with by year and quarter and month. Go back to my initial presentation. So I've got what my target was, and I've actually got now the amount that was done. I could decide that I want to see this in a different visualization. I could maybe try a column chart, and you can see now that we have the different values by the columns. I could decide I want to see this as an area chart. So basically, you can use different types of visualizations. But for this example, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use a combination chart. So I'm going to say that I want one to be a column, and I want the other to be a line value. So I'm going to put the collected target into the line, and now I've got my column and I've got my line denoting what my target was. Now you'll see that I've got quite a range of dates at the moment because I'm showing year, quarter, and month, and I've got quite a bit of data over here. So what I might want to be able to do is to be able to filter the data that has been shown on this dashboard. So we're going to bring this week ending field back into the dashboard. And what we're going to do is we're going to say we want this to be a slicer visualization. So anybody who uses slicers in Excel, really great technology, allows us to filter the data that we've got. So over here now, I've got a range of dates starting from the beginning of my week ending and ending at the end over here. And I can easily change these. If I just want to see 2017, for example, I could change the year. And so I want to see that. I could change the month. So I want to see that. So now I've got now just from the 1st of January across to the 17th of December over there in 2017. And now you can see that my data has been filtered to actually show the total collected amount, and my graph's automatically being filtered as well. I may find though, as I'm developing this dashboard, that changing these dates, I might want a quicker way of doing it because I might always just want to change what the year is. So just like in Excel, what we're able to do is to use additional formulas to be able to generate new fields. So over here, if I go to my data modeling, I can create a new column. And because I've got the week ending over here, I could say that I want to create a new field called year. And what I'm going to say is that the year equals, and any of you familiar with Excel would know there's a Excel function called year. So I'm just choosing that exactly like I would in Excel, and it's the year of the date. In this case, my date is actually a field called week ending. So I'm not using A1 to A15,000 or A10,000 as you would ranges within Excel. You're using field names here. So basically I'm saying I want to know the year of the week ending over here. I'm going to press enter on that, and we've now created a new field over here, and I can actually drop this into my dashboard over here. Creates a column chart. I'm going to say I want it to be a slicer, and I'm actually going to list this. So now I've actually got the years available for my data source over here. And if I want to just see, say, 2016, then it will automatically filter this, or 2017. Very easy to do. So I can create new fields just like I would in Excel. Now I'm looking at this data at the moment, and I'm maybe thinking, oh, that's really nice to be able to see that there's an actual and there's a target. But what is the actual difference between the two? How much is these two actually different if we look at it by each of these periods, a month over here? So what I also have is something called a measure. So a measure is basically the same as being able to take a range of data and be able to sum it up. So if you were to go into Excel and say, I want to sum up A1 to A10,000, you would have one cell with the result of A1 to A10,000. So measure does basically the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to sum up, and we're going to say, I want to sum the total for the collected, and I want to sum up the total for the collect target. I want to then subtract one from the other to get the difference. So again, just like you would in Excel, we would start a new measure, and I'm going to call this collected difference, and we would just say equals the sum of the collected, and you can see the fields are there just like there would be if they were being looked up there, minus the sum of the collect target. Now hopefully you've seen this is nothing more difficult than what you would do in Excel. Press enter, and I now have a new field now that will do that calculation for me. So over here, I actually have a waterfall chart, which I always find is a really great way of being able to represent differences, and whether I've got a positive difference, like I've got over here, or I've got a negative difference. So what I could do is I say, I want to use a, whoops, not choose that. Undo actually works really well as well. So we've got a waterfall chart now. And what I'm going to do now is use this new field, the collected difference, in my y-axis. And in my category now, I'm going to actually look at this by the week ending. And you'll see again that it's got this hierarchy that's being created. So I'm going to go to the same hierarchy by year, by quarter, by month. And you can see now that the waterfall now is representing the difference. Obviously, over here, we've got a big actual, and you can see the waterfall showing this going up. And then we've got a number of negatives over here that this is now showing. And then I get my net effect over here, my total, and it's now showing me the difference between the two values over that period of time that's been shown. So you can see now that I can easily add new visualizations onto this. So really the Power BI interface within these reports is really about the ability to use these visualizations, create slices, and be able to then filter your data. You will find as well that there's ability to actually filter your data from within visualizations. So if you actually select one of the visualizations or one of the data points, you will see then it will actually filter all your other data points as well. So you get additional filtering capabilities as well. So that's just a sort of quick overview of the Power BI report. What we're going to do now is we're going to take this report and we're going to actually publish it into the internet, into the Power BI service. And we're going to have a quick look at that. So to be able to do this, I need to save this because it needs a name. I'm just going to call it number 3. You can see there's a couple of practices there. So we've got presentation dashboard number 3 that's now been saved. And on our home now, what I'm going to tell it to do is to publish this into my Power BI service on the internet. And then we'll have a look at the internet to see what functions we've got. So the first part is it asks me where do I want to publish this. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit more in the Power BI service, but for now I'm just going to put it into my own workspace that can be used. So you'll see that it's now publishing that up onto the internet, and it should just tell me just now that it's hopefully completed that. Okay, so we've got success, and I'm going to click on, and it's now going to load my login here quickly. The Power BI service that has now been
Ian, I think we may have lost you. Our screen is frozen. There we go. We've got no sound coming from you though, Ian. Hello, Ian. No sound coming from you. Ian, we can't hear you. Ian, we've lost your sound connection. No sound coming from you, Ian. Where are you, Ian? Yes, showing on my slide that it lost the connection. Okay, so what do we do? We're watching you mutely do this, but we can't hear you. Doing a sound check on my end.
I can, oh, there we go. I've
There
got
we
connection
go.
restore.
Okay,
Okay.
all righty.
Okay,
Oh,
so,
fun. Okay, right.
okay, good. So you can hear me again?
Yes, so you're just posting this on the web, and that's where you are.
Yes, I just want to just briefly talk a little bit about the Power BI service. So I was saying that here I'm posting onto the internet, but for a lot of organizations, they may, for certain reasons, not want to post onto an internet solution. You can have a Power BI service running within your own organization as well. Obviously, there's licensing costs and things that would come along with that. But if you are, your data governance prevents you from utilizing cloud services and things like that, there is an option to run this on premise. But I think from being an Excel user, this takes on one of the biggest challenges we've always had with Excel is sharing of information and data that we found out. Normally, the traditional way with Excel is we bundle it into an email and we send it off to 20 people, and then we have 20 versions of the Excel file floating around in email space. And it's always been a challenge to really be able to share information, and when it gets updated, that it can be updated to everybody. And this is really what Power BI service is sorting out, I think, for everybody out there. Some good news with this as well is that it's very open standard. So it's been designed to run on HTML5. So it runs with Apple, it runs with Android, with the mobile side, and which is kind of unusual for Microsoft to play well with others. But it's really done a great job of the fact of being able to open up the sharing of information and data to everybody. So as I say, this runs as a cloud service, the one that I'm going to now. Now you'll see that I have my workspace on the side over here, and what it's currently done is it's actually updated the data set into the cloud now. And that actually can be really useful to other people as well, because you can actually, from Excel, you can connect to this data set. And if you want to do your own ad hoc analysis of the data sets, you can actually download the information into Excel and do your own presentations and things, or your own data analysis and things like that. Over here, we've got the report that has just been loaded, and you can see it's exactly the one. And if I go into this, you'll see that.
And we've lost you again. Lost you again, Ian. Frozen cursor, no sound. I see at top left of screen you're talking, but we can't hear you. Can't hear you, Ian. Can't hear you. Can't hear you. We could do a discussion of Power BI. Has anybody in the room got there? It says lost connection again. Yes, I see that, Ian. So you want to retry coming up?
I do have a question.
Here's a question. Trying to reconnect. While you try and reconnect, here's a question.
Is Power BI an add-in into Excel, or is it a separate software package?
Is Power BI an add-in into Excel, or is it a separate package, is the question we're getting asked. We're still not seeing your cursor move. We're still not. It's a separate app is being responded to from the. There we go. Cursor's moving. Still can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Now we're having a little discussion here. We can see your screen, and we're talking about how amazing this is that it's free.
Okay.
There we go. Now,
yeah.
Ian's picking up the conversation. So the question was, is it an add-in to Excel, or is it an app? And the answer was it's a separate app. And the question was, how much does it cost? And the answer is it's free.
Yes, there's two licensing costs to it. So there is a free version, and desktop, which I've just created the dashboard on, is totally free for anybody with a work email address to download and to use. So basically, you can create your dashboards. The whole thing about the free one, though, is really about the fact if you want to share this information with anybody else. So with the free version, you can post this to yourself, and you can work with it yourself, but you can't share it with anybody. So you have to have the pro version to be able to share your dashboards and to be able to collaborate and work with anybody else. The fee is normally around $10 per month per user for the pro version. But I think also Microsoft often gives you a trial period when you start off with Power BI that you can use the pro version for a bit of time. Okay, so basically we're back. I'm hoping that we don't lose that again. So what I was sort of saying, though, is that we've posted this into my workspace, but if we talk about the fact of sharing with other people, you'll see that we've got this ability to create app workspaces. So what that means is that you and your colleagues, so if you're working in sales or you're working in marketing, you could have an app space for marketing, you could have an app space for finance, you could have an app space for a team, and then basically you can share these amongst yourselves. People can come in and they can use these desktop items, make changes, update them if you give them the rights to do that. You also have an option called apps. So what you can do is you can package your dashboards and your reports together, and you can then actually create an app, and then you can share that with a range of people, and that would be much more view only. You know, they would have view access. They wouldn't necessarily have the same rights that they would within a workspace to be able to make changes and update things. So there's quite a lot of collaboration that can happen in these spaces. One of the things that does confuse people a lot is the fact you've got a report and a dashboard, and everybody's going, but I've just heard you saying you're creating a dashboard. Well, yes, the dashboard is sort of being framed over here, but in Microsoft world, this is a report because here we've got the functionality to be able to change the filters and to filter our data. With a dashboard, because we've got things like smartphones which don't have very big screen real estate, the dashboard gives us the ability to be able to share these individual visualizations without necessarily having the interactivity or the screen real estate that's associated with a bigger screen like this. So if you've got a laptop or a tablet, you might want to see this screen, but if we go into our smartphone, we may want to see it in a different way. So what we do with the dashboard is we actually pin items into the dashboard. So I'm just going to give this a name. We'll just call it presentation and pin it. And we're just going to pin a couple of these into a dashboard, and you see that Microsoft is telling me that we've done this. It can be a little bit annoying to get rid of it. There we go. Okay, so we're going to pin that in there as well. And we'll just do the waterfall graph as the last one. Okay, so I've pinned those now into dashboard, and you can see now and you'll see that each of these visualizations now are being shown as its own widget. And what that means is that when sharing this, I'm not going to move it too much around. I'm going to show you what a phone view would look like. So if I took the, okay, I want to see what this is going to look like. You'll see that you now have these visualizations in a portrait style within your phone. So you see what are these scorecards, what are these totals. Now with something like a graph here, you can actually click on the graph, and it will take you then into a bigger version of this graph, and then you can actually move your finger across the different months, and it will tell you the values for them those months. So within the visualizations themselves, some of the visualizations do have a little bit more that can be done sort of within a phone environment. So this really just helps us share amongst the different mobile technologies that we may be wanting to share about. Okay, so that's basically our phone view. What else I just want to show you while we were on here is a couple of the technologies. And so at the top here, you've got ask a question about your data. So this is something called natural question and natural question and answer system. So let's say, for example, I phrased a question saying, what was the invoiced for 2017? And there you go. Now it'll show me the result of what the total invoice was for 2017. I could phrase a different question and say we want to know what was their bank balance by week ending. And you'll see that it's starting to pick up the field names, and it can help me just finish off the week ending or so. So we're showing this as a graph. I may want to see this as a column graph, and then say I want to see this column chart, and then it would be able to do that. Now, please note that this type of technology is very much a work in progress. So I think there's huge potential for it. I think it's obviously where the world's going. Artificial intelligence, pattern-seeking software, machine learning, all those type of things are really coming in and going to be assisting us to get much better understanding from our data and to support the processes. But it is definitely a technology that is still developing, and yeah, you'll see that you'll need to work a little bit with it as it goes along. But you can see where Microsoft's really trying to take this is the ability to sort of ask these natural style questions. Another thing that they're working on at the moment is the ability, I'm just going to see if I can move across here, to set up and alert you to change. So if we take a scorecard over here, and I click over here, I've got this ability to manage alerts. So on here, I could add alert rule. And here I could start to put in some, for this, if it goes above something or below something and there's a certain threshold, then I can get it to actually email me when these thresholds are actually put together. Now, one of the big parts that's really happening with cloud computing, though, is the ability of cloud computing to work with other cloud computing services. So Microsoft have also designed a system called Microsoft Flow. Microsoft Flow brings in a lot more options in terms of trigger and actions that can happen around these types of alerts. So in this case, you can actually link your alerts to Microsoft Flows, which then can give you a lot more sophistication with the types of actions that you may want to be triggered from these types of alerts. I know this is something Philip's already played around with and got working for him whenever the dashboards have been updated, so he gets a range of alerts when he needs them that tells him what he should be looking at. So yeah, so alerts and a couple of nice technologies there. Another technology, if we're talking about sort of Q&A, the ability to ask natural language questions to your data, is also the ability for the computer to run through your data and see if it starts to pick up any meaningful patterns within your data. And again, I'd like to point out that this is very much a technology that is in development, and but I think we can all see where the world is going. I don't know if anybody sees some of those Google things where they asking questions and getting replies, and you've got Alexa and things like that. So we can certainly see where in the world we're going with the fact of is helping us to make sense of our information. So I click on Insights over here. We've got a collected target amount, and that shouldn't have actually happened. I think that my internet, well, the internet connection is maybe struggling a little bit. But what it would have done is the fact that it runs through the data and it finds your minimum, maximums, your average amounts, and then it looks for correlations within your data. So it'll see, is your data correlated with any other key variables? It will look for if there's any key dimensions within your data. Is there any relationships or patterns within that software? So basically it comes back with a list of images that shows the relationships or the patterns and an explanation of it. So I'm going to attempt a different way of doing this. So here I've done it on one visual on just my collected target. You can also do it on your entire data set. So if we use this option on my data set called Quick Insights, we can trigger that on, and that's actually worked. So we can view the insights. So you'll see over here, and as I say, this is definitely a working progress, but basically you get a visualization showing you, in this case, it's kind of a correlation, and it's showing that there's, well, it's actually clusters, and it's showing you different clusters, and then it gives you an explanation of that. Now, if you find a meaningful insight, you can actually pin that visual then into your dashboard itself. So you can add that within, but I think you can start to see what the software is trying to do here. And to be honest with you, I think with the amount of investment and resources going to evolve, it's really going to support the data decision-making capability of analysts to be able to get insights that they may or may not pick up. But at the same time, it's still got quite a way to go. Very quickly over here, what we've just done is we've now published into the Power BI service, and we're able to be able to share within workspaces. We can share with our colleagues. We can share through apps. We can share with our colleagues and make apps of all these reports and dashboards together. Part of the older technology was actually to share your dashboards in a traditional way. So basically what you would do is you could go to your dashboard and you just click on your share button, and you could then share it to the email address, for example, or if you wanted to use an access point where you give them access. But that very much has been replaced now rather by the workspace apps and the apps itself as the technology to use, but you can still use them. So you can sort of see Power BI service very much around collaboration, getting together, understanding, and then, as I say, the sharing onto the mobile devices of your tablets and your phones. And then we have the pattern seeking software, the natural language question and answer as technologies on top of this as well. What I would just want to finish off with as well, as we head towards the end of the session, is to talk about something called custom visuals. So I mentioned early on now that we've got some visuals, like we've got a waterfall graph over here, and we've got a combo graph over here, and scorecards. These visualizations, if we go back, these visualizations come standard with your Power BI, and I'm very effective. And you would start very much with the fact of using these visualizations to put your reports together. But as you take your data forward, there may be new visualizations that you might want to use. So I'm just going to load another file over here, which is a example. It's actually data as well that Philip gave me to play around with a while back. So I thought I'll just run you through some examples of a couple of custom visuals that we used in this. Okay, so we have got a bit of a cash flow dashboard on here. So the first one over here is if you like your gauges and you want to know if a figure is in the right zones, you get your sort of green for go, amber not so good, red so bad. So you can use like a tachometer type of gauge. So that's actually what it's called. It's called a tachometer, this one. Down here, we've got a performance graph. So this is actually a bullet graph over here. So here we've actually got the target, and here we've got the actual. So this is often used, a bullet graph, to be able to show you performance. You can see over here my waterfall, kind of doing the same as what the components of cash flow do. So just of using little mini graphs. So one of the things often we like to do within dashboards is just by using the area graph, we can often pick up the trends very, very quickly from small little area graphs. And we call these, you put them together like this, and you can create like a matrix of little graphs. And they can often give you a lot of insight very quickly as to what the key trends are happening within your data. So very, very easy to do that. And if you actually pick one of these graphs just within Microsoft, you actually get the ability to be able to add trend lines, min-max lines, average lines, median lines, percentile lines. Not all of these analytics are available on all of the visualizations, but very, very easy to add these into your data if you want reference lines to be added as additional data. And really, I think the last one that I just want to touch on, I think really goes back to the fact of our sort of machine learning and pattern seeking sort of software. Actually, sorry, there's another part I'm going to show you just before I finish, which is actually some of the other custom visuals that are available. So this is an interesting one by a company called Narrative Science. And what's happened here is that I've actually taken data and I've put it into the system. And everything that's on these bullet points here was actually generated by the computer. So the computer has actually gone in here and done a number of key calculations that an analyst would often do and come up with results on. So the computer now has actually generated these. And you could find your analyst, for instance, taking 45 minutes or an hour to put these types of things together, versus the fact that the computer is able to assist us by doing these calculations. And analysts, we can actually spend time understanding what in the world should we be focused on. So instead of doing the actual calculations, we can focus on the fact of understanding what is the data trying to tell us. What are the patterns within the data? What's the relationships within the data? So a product like this can take away quite a lot of the fact of the number crunching things that traditionally sort of people may be doing. So I think it's an interesting product, and as I say, it's got a long way to go in terms of the fact of being truly effective, but it does go to show the fact that the new machine learning and pattern seeking software and artificial intelligence and all the names they give it could have quite an impact on the fact of how we understand and we relate to our data going forward. Just to sort of finish off, though, we've spoken about these custom visuals, and what you'll see is that Microsoft actually has a marketplace, and you can go through these Power BI visuals, and these are produced by companies or people, and they're all open source type of options. So you can go through into your own Power BI. Some of them run as a service, and they may want you to then actually subscribe to these going forward. At the beginning, all of these were actually free. Going forward, for one's free. Example, maybe visualize dash just overview of someone. And basically, you just click add, and when you click add it over here, you can see this is the narratives for Power BI, which is this one over here. It just gets added as a new visualization, or this one is the bullet chart. Okay, so technology problems notwithstanding, losing the sound a bit during it. I hope that basically is what I wanted to take you through on the Power BI side. Is there any questions? Anything anybody wants to go through?
So here in the room, Chris Lucas has a question, and it is. Can you cut information out of Power BI and put it into other Microsoft applications like Word?
The real interface is with Excel. So if you're going to put things into Word, it would be more your copy paste type of options. But there's actually a Power BI publisher that can be downloaded. And within the Power BI publisher, there's two things I can do. One is I can connect to data that is on my Power BI service, and then I can do pivot tables and that from there. The other option that I've actually got is I can actually pin information from Excel into my Power BI service. And this is quite a few of my customers kind of do at the beginning, is they often sometimes have quite complicated or complex Excel spreadsheets, and they have a range of data or a table that produces a result. And it's often not easy to take this into Power BI and just get it running straight away. And what you can do is you can actually take, I know this isn't going to be a great example, but we're just going to take this range over here. I say I want to pin this. Hopefully it's picked up who I am. I'm just wondering if I've got the right logins here. Let me just check to make sure I'm the right person. Yeah, looks like it. Okay, so I'm going to pin this now. I'm going to say I want it in my workspace. I'm going to put it into an existing dashboard. Click OK. So now I'm pinned into my dashboard. I go back over here, and you now see that it is now actually available within my Power BI service. And this can now be shared on people's phones and other options. So the interface to Excel with the Power BI publisher, very, very strong. To other options such as Word, and that would probably be more your standard sort of copy-paste options. What you can do as well within you can export data out of any of your visualizations. And if I actually show my data over here, show me what the table would look like of this data. So if I was to actually export this would be the table of data that would be actually exported out through the standard sort of CSV interface. Any other questions?
One more. Here's another question. Does it interface with Access?
Yes, it does. It reads. It can read Microsoft Access data sets. So you'll see with the Get Data over here. We'll just go to Database, and Access Database is one of the options. However, I have to warn you of one of the challenges that we do have with Access databases is often people have got 64-bit operating systems, so they download that we have Power BI 64-bit, and sometimes interfacing to Access 32-bit sometimes a little bit of a challenge, and you may find yourself having to download some DLLs or whatever technologies they're using to connect the two together. So just be aware of that if you've got 64-bit Power BI and you've got a 32-bit access, sometimes can be a little bit challenging. But yeah, otherwise, if it does connect, it's very seamless and easy. You just see a list of tables, connect to the tables, read the tables. At any point in time, you can refresh data from tables, and it'll just read the latest data from those tables at any point. Talking of that as well, refreshing, if you do create connections within the Power BI service, you can actually set up refreshing and how refreshing is actually done to your source data as well. So there are options around that as well. It does get a little bit complicated depending on exactly what you're trying to set up, but it can be done quite easily.
So here's one more question. This is the last one.
On the refresh
Sure.
of the data,
On the refresh of the data,
how quickly can you make it real time?
how quickly can you make it real time? I think this is the dynamic data question we were talking about in the dry run.
Yeah, so basically, again, it depends down to the system that you want to set up here. So if you're looking at real-time data within Power BI, you need to be streaming your data into the cloud directly, because Microsoft needs to be able to obviously read real-time data as it's sort of coming in. So in that instance, you would use the Azure infrastructure, and you would set up your real-time data feeds coming into Power BI, and then you can have real-time data updates within the Power BI itself. And you'll see on YouTube there's a number of demos from Microsoft showing this capability, where they've set up a real-time, sensors around a room, for example, and then they're showing actually how the data is changing within the Power BI interface. If you're not needing actual real-time, then it's all around the sort of scheduling of how often you actually refresh within your data. And that's something that you would sort of set within your data set when you're looking at your settings over on your workplace over here in your data set settings. So I'll see if I can find it just now, but you have, there we go, schedule refreshing. So over here, in this case, because I'm using an Excel file, it's sitting on my PC, I actually have to set up a data gateway so that the two can speak to each other. If I had an online Azure SQL tables, for example, then it can read those directly without having to go through data gateways from the cloud. And then you basically over here can schedule your refreshes, how often you want to schedule, daily, hourly, and so on. And you would set those. But the more refreshes you do, you will tend to find your licensing and costs will tend to be higher. Obviously, more data is being processed.
So we thank you so much, Ian, for taking time to do this with us today. And I want to ask before we leave, I hate to admit this, but the platform that you referenced at the very beginning in your introduction that hosts the training videos that you do is called udemy.com. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Udemy. Yes. So it's the udemy.com. It's a very good educational platform, and it's got a wide range of sort of topics and things. So especially if people are looking to build short course skills just around certain topics, you'll find there's a wide range of courses on there. I would just suggest as well, though, that they have a lot of special offers, promotions. So really look out for those. Yeah, you get some really good special offers. So yeah, if you do go into Udemy, look for those promotions. And pay the full price.
You go to Udemy, you look for Ian Littlejohn, and we're thanking you so much for your time today, Ian. Thank you. We're getting ready to sign off.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Applause here. Applause.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, folks.